All right, so welcome everybody to our midday mentoring dialogue. We are very excited to have Dr. Marianne Wokeck here. She is Chancellor's Emeritus, or Chancellor's Professor Emeritus. She was in the Department of History in the School of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And if you don't know what a Chancellor's Professor is, that means she's the best of the best that we have on campus. And so we're really excited to have her here to present about CVs and writing an effective CV. And so we're going to turn the time over here. So thank you, Dr. Wokeck, for coming and sharing this time with us.
Thank you. Much appreciate the opportunity, and welcome to you all. And since this is not a webinar, but a seminar, you can interrupt any which way. So I let Dr. Hardy or Dr. Roper handle it if they see something in chat that they want to pass on. But on the whole, this is not a terribly structured meeting. What I was asked to do and what I offered to do is to talk a little bit about CDs, and I'm trying to see whether my share the screen works, because I prepared a very rudimentary PowerPoint so that we can that I can make some points in writing. So let me try that. And okay, slide to start from. Okay, that should start. So I hope that works. Yes, it does. So going back to the fashioning your CV, I really want to indicate that CVs are not cast in stone. What I highly recommend that you have one that is going to be your base CV, where you record everything that you want to capture, but you may take from that base, your template, if you will, then what you need for the particular occasion. So it is very useful to, I think, distinguish between what you have for yourself and from what you can copy and paste. But it is really important to be flexible and know that you have to be flexible as you are asked for submitting a CV. So what I want to start out with is a negative by saying what a CV is not. Curriculum vitae is the full name for what we have abbreviated to CV. And probably unlike you, I spent 7 years of my youth in learning Latin. And so it's helpful that I can actually spell curriculum vitae full out. But there's not much else to it, and you don't have to do it CV. Everybody knows what it is. But I think it's important to realize that it is different from a resume. A resume is really a skill-focused employment history. And so if you were to apply for a job simply to make money, that would be more a resume, and you structure a resume differently from a CV. And the resume is, so therefore, this is really not about a resume. The CV, however, is a guide to your education, to your intellectual or academic growth in that sense, and to your experience within that framework of education and intellectual growth. And you can think of it as the skeleton or outline for your personal statement. And that too is that your personal statement is your story. Who are you? Where have you been? What are your goals? All that kind of who are you and how you want to fashion to somebody who doesn't know you, who you are. It is very helpful, and I don't know whether you have done that, but in many instances you will be asked for a personal statement. And so crafting one, and again, having that as a template from which you can copy and paste, depending on what the situation is, it is helpful to have that. And it is even more helpful to have somebody else read your personal statement, because generally speaking, academics or those striving to be academicians tend not to be good at bragging about themselves. Some of us have spent quite a bit of time to tell you not to use I in your writings. In this case, you have to use I, and you have to really talk about yourself. So that is something that that needs some work. And I'm bringing the personal statement up because in some form it comes up, or it is part of your letter of application. Because in your letter of application to an university or to a granting agency, you have to then use that CV as the structure alongside that you use together and in complementary fashion with your letter of application or personal statement. And I think that is really, really important to keep in mind, that typically when you submit an application, or when the people who read it will look at the CV and sort of get a quick glance to orient themselves, and then they turn to the personal statement. Some of my colleagues turn it around, read the personal statement first, or the letter of application first, and then go to the CV. You want to be very, very sure that the two are perfectly aligned and complementary. And so the CV almost never stands alone. It always is the guide to something that you want to get across. So I want to make that point very, very loud and clear. And not all CVs look alike. That's a truism. Disciplines pay different attention to particular things. There are different traditions for CVs, and there are what I call audience specific. That is, do they go to a university? Do they go to a particular department? Do they go to a granting agency? Those are the kinds of things that influence how you have to shape, how you have to fashion your CV. And for that, it is really, really important to have a few things in mind. One is that most CVs are structured in chronological order. And almost all the ones that I've seen are in reverse chronological order. They start with the most recent. So that's, I think, the norm, but it could also be the other way around. And almost all CVs in some form or other ask for your role, in many cases, your authorship or the authorship. And there we distinguish by, are you the sole author? Have you collaborated with somebody? Or are you part of a team? And so there are different ways in which one can indicate that, and we'll get to some examples a little later. So that is something that, again, the CV at a glance wants to know. Are you doing all things by yourself? Are you collaborating? Are you a member of a team? And in your case, you probably start out more often not as a sole author, but together with somebody, and that is perfectly fine. That's what people want to know. And the other organizing factor that comes in is what are the outcomes or the output, and I don't know why I mistyped there. Academics look at books, articles, reports, websites, podcasts, and other things. And in your case, people as they start out, and now especially at our institution more often, we also want to hear about community engagement and civic opportunities and volunteering opportunities. And they tend to come at the very end of a CV. They are sort of something in addition, but you want to fashion it so that it speaks to what the main thrust, the main focus of the CV is. So if you volunteered as somebody who is applying to med school, and you volunteered in one of the clinics at the Bonner Place, for example, you want to say what your role with regard to medicine or treatment or health or whatever was, so that you can make that connection. And again, you use your letter of application or your personal statement to make that connection very clear. So at this stage in your career, it is okay and sometimes helpful for the reader to have those that are not strictly academic, like volunteering and civic engagement or community engagement, included in a CV. I'm showing you some examples, and and point out certain things, and then we can open it up for questions. And some are from the medical school, the law school, philanthropy, and humanities. And I need to apologize in advance because I used CVs of real people, and I can do so because they're real people at the university, and we are pretty public. We want people to know who we are because it is a reflection on our discipline, on our school, on our campus, and therefore they're readily available. And so I'm not giving away any personal secrets that should be respected and that are off limits in a broader context. But my apology is that because I used them, I simply made screenshots and the writing is very, very small. So my apologies for that, but that's the way it is. I'm starting out with an absolutely accomplished colleague of mine, also emerita at this point in the School of Medicine. And as you can see, what I want to point out in this particular one, that it is not unusual to start out with personal data. However, Dr. Bull started out in a very, very old-fashioned way. We no longer provide this kind of information. It is actually forbidden to ask for that kind of information. So this is why some people, some of the older people still provide it. But I use this example in part because somebody like Dr. Bull may be on the selection committee. So this may be somebody who sees a CV, who expects that, or at least he wouldn't be, who would be used to that. So I thought I'd include this. But you do not and you should not include anything but your name and how you can be reached on your CV. So so what she gives is the is her telephone and electronic mail, and the word electronic mail is interesting and indicates that this is an old-fashioned CV. And sometimes it is important, but there again too, use your judgment. She has citizenship, and in some, this is what I mean with audience specific. In some instances, you do want to indicate that you are a permanent resident or a citizen or on a visa. But again, you need to find out what the requirements are and what people need to know or want to know before you include that. And so again, be cautious with what personal data you divulge. You have to do name and how you can be reached, but nobody needs to know that you have a spouse who's in the same, has the same degree as you, nor that you have children and that they were spaced very neatly 2 years apart, which is good for demographers to know, but it is really does not belong in this particular context. The other one I want to find, the other item I want to point out is, whoop, sorry, I did not mean to do that, that the education is in this case, chronological order. She starts with her BS and with her MD, and that is under education very common. However, when you go to the accomplishments, then it very often switches to a reverse chronological order. So it's something to pay attention to. My colleague, Dana Kostroon in the history department, and this is an older one of hers, I want to point out a couple of things on her CV. She starts out with appointments. And as you can tell, that she has been at 2 different places, which is important. And sometimes it is something that you may want to find out if you have had internships at different institutions. So this might come up as a point, not exactly as academic appointments as it is meant here, but in your CV as well. And here you see that she does the education in the other order. She does it in and starts with the recent one, and then goes to where she got her BA. And here you can see she made the decision to put the chronology, that is the dates, on the right side. It's not the first thing you see, it is the degree that you see first. And this is how you want to pay attention. What does your audience want to know? Is your audience, from what you can tell, more interested in where you got your education or when you got it? This is a judgment call. And in effect, it doesn't really matter, but it may be something you want to pay attention to. We all, if we have them, are very, very proud to list honors and awards. And I think that your experience in grad school at IUPUI will have, you will have encountered that your professors are very eager, when appropriate, to nominate students for awards so that you can put as a student awards on your CV. And so if there are awards that you know of and you are interested in, it is worthwhile talking with your advisor whether you should apply for that, because it is a good thing to do. And here is something that I want to point out, that here Dana lists professional service. Now, this is something that is not strictly academic, but this is something that academic in the classical sense of research and teaching, but it is academic in the sense of service. And we still very much pay attention to the classical triad of research, teaching, and service. And in this example, you can see that she has been a very active member of her profession, which in some instances is really good to know. Again, at IUPUI, we have a graduate and professional student organization. If you are a member of it, or if you have played a role in it, that is something that is to be put on a CV. That is a good entry to have and use. And then you can see that we have, as the next category, our grants and fellowships. And I want to call attention to the first line in the research fellowship from IU. It says PI. That is principal investigator. That is a very clear indication for that she and she alone earned it. This is important. Now, in many instances, being a co-PI is pretty good too. But it is important to include that if you can, or if that was whatever the role is you played. And the other that you can see is also important, and that is how much money was that fellowship or that grant worth. And you can see there's a very, very wide range. The highest in this instance was 75,000, and the lowest was actually, it was 2,400 euro. And if you are picky, you said, well, you could have translated that into dollars and not let the reader figure out what it is. But nevertheless, in this, it doesn't matter. It gives you the category. So those are the kinds of things that I wanted to point out in this particular CV. I used my own CV for some other points. At the very top, you see that I did some consulting. And that is an indication that, and that goes a little bit with what I tried to convey when you said you can include volunteering or community or civic engagement. Here it is within the context of academic work, but it is something that is maybe of interest to people to demonstrate that you are what your holistic self is that is applying or for a grant or applying for a fellowship. So hence I point that out. And you can see that I actually, in the grants and fellowships, I did not include the money, and it was an internal one, so there wasn't much money. It was more of an honorarium. What I do want to call attention to is that when it comes to listing my publications, print and electronic publications, and only after 97, because that was when I was tenured. So some people in some disciplines keep their CVs complete. They go on for pages and pages and pages and pages, and they're not helpful because you can't find your way in it easily. But you are not in that, you don't have that problem. So therefore, it is really not much that I just want to point out that some people use Select as Dana and I did, because we did not want to burden people to read things that were no longer or used to be relevant, but are no longer because one has moved on. And so, but I do want to point out that I have a little asterisk that indicates refereed works. And that is something where academics pay close attention to. And that is that if your work, whatever it is, has gone through a referee process that had other people evaluate your work. In other words, you're indicating that there is an outside evaluation that made your work legit, if you will, in the eyes of having contributed genuinely, originally, and by yourself to this advancement of knowledge. So that is an important part. And as you can tell, that in the listing, I do not have in the earlier, in the first entries, I do not repeat my name. I do not say that I'm an author. In this case, this is implied. However, the last entry, editor with Hammond, Satcom, William, blah, 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 indicates that I was part of a team, that it was not authorship, but editorial, and that is important to note. So you do want to make those distinctions. And this one I chose from the law school for two reasons. And one is that you see that SSRN, that's not what I want yet. It is a reference to the way that the papers are, the publications are evaluated by their frequency of citation. This is, and citation indices have become more and more important because, again, it's another form of peer review, if you will. In this case, it is that what you produce, what the author produced, has found resonance in the community of his discipline, in the community of his academic pursuit, in this case, the law school. So this is something that may not be yet important for you, but that does become important as people go through an academic career. And the other part that I want to indicate is under law review and journal articles. He has, after the first seize the moment entry, he provides a reference to that article in PDF format. And this is something that is becoming more common these days as well. And it can be very, very useful to actually say when that is available and has been published, to say, okay, if you want to look at what I wrote and how it is, here it is. You can make an easy, I make it easy for you to look at it. So both these I chose so that there is the outside evaluation or one's own way to look at it more closely available in this format for a CV. And this is a CV where you see that the dates are really not hidden, but the dates are part of the publication date of the publication, not up front, because that was not the important part, although you can easily see what the chronology is, and that he is most certainly a very prolific and productive author, because you can see the sequence: 2009, 2014, 2015, 2017, and 2021. I wish I had written that many books in that short a time. I did not make that. I produced some, but not to that effect. So this is something that impresses me. And there are articles at the same time as well. I want to conclude with an example that is very much in the accomplished website, internet linked thing that works exceedingly well. It does not in this particular case, although he has a formal CV, more formal CV as well. He is a historian, so he can do that as well. But in this case, I want to point out a number of things. You see the name, you see the current title, and you see the address, which is linked to the program, not anything private. The private part of this is he has a very nice picture. That is not required, but those kinds of things are becoming more important. And as I have been thinking about it, here Tyrone makes it clear that he belongs to an underrepresented minority. That is a decision that is not required, that everybody needs to make, but I want to point out that it is a decision. Sometimes it is in a name, sometimes it is in a picture. And as I was thinking, as I was looking at Dr. Bull's CV, that what do colleagues of ours who do not want to identify as binary gender, what do they do, and do they indicate that? Is that something that should go into the personal part of the statement or not? And I cannot answer that question. This is one that I have not seen an example to that, but we are only very slowly paying attention to that. And I don't know how colleagues who prefer to use, not to use the gender pronouns, how they handle it. And I don't know, maybe Tabitha and others who have seen applications that are maybe broader have encountered that, and I would be interested in finding out. But what I want to find out, to point out also, is that in Dr. Friedman's thing, he not only gives his email, but he gives his website. And what he does, and if you were to click on it, his website is very, very accomplished and very, very spectacular. So if you, as a young person, more likely than some of us older people, have a website that is really good, mine's very dull, then you may well want to include that information. But if you do so, then you have to be absolutely certain that what is on that website you want people to see. And so that's again, it's a decision that you have to make. So in concluding, I really want to emphasize that it is worthwhile starting out with a CV that you build every year, or everything that you do, or everything that you accomplish. That is your basis from which you then copy and paste into a specific CV that is tied to whether it's an application, whether it's a grant, whether it is a showcase, whether it is for a nomination for an award. Then you have to massage that or fashion that so that it fits what is in the requirements for that particular application or a situation. I recommend very highly that let's assume you are applying to a PhD program, being a master's student, you're applying to a PhD program. Do make sure that you go onto the website of that department, the department you want to become part of, and look at the CVs of the people in that department, especially the person you will want to work with. What you will find likely is that the CVs are not standardized within that department, because people, once you started out having a CV, you don't always want to refashion it completely. But there are some schools, and ours is one of them. There's one, our campus is one of them, that we have to actually every year as academics submit an annual report. And that is in a prefab, specialized, prescribed manner that you have to give that information. What is happening with these kinds of programs now is that you can feed the information and then you can choose, because of the wonders of software applications, whether you want a CV made out of that information that fits the NIH or that fits the NEH, or that fits a more standard in history or in natural sciences or in engineering. So this is something that really has made our lives easier. We can now fashion our CVs in a way that is not as time consuming and doesn't come just down to reformatting, but that really where we can think, what do we want to include? Why do we want to include it? And where does it best fit, and in what form does it best fit because of what the requirements, or at least the strong suggestions are. And so that is, and to get back to the beginning statement that I made, make sure that your personal statement or application and your CV fit perfectly with each other, that they're a complementary aspect of demonstrating who you are, how you have become who you are educationally, and what you can offer as an intellectual, well-connected, civically engaged person. That is, I think, what you want to keep as a goal, and then go ahead and do it. And never, never be shy asking somebody to read it. Because I can tell you from long-standing experience, it is very easy to make a mistake and not see it because you've seen what you have written into that CV often enough, you simply don't see it anymore. Having somebody else read it is really, really useful and will prevent you from making sometimes it's just a formatting mistake that looks awkward. Sometimes it's a mistake that you wish you never did. And these days, autocorrect can get you into deep trouble. I wrote an email not too long ago, dashing it off, trying to say in haste, blah, blah, blah. It was sent as in hate. This is not the kind of mistake you want anywhere in your CV or your personal statement for that matter. So yes, please have somebody, always allow for enough time that you can read and reread and have somebody else read it. Any questions? I'll gladly, I'll get out of the shared and any questions you may have.
Yes, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can just yell out. We had one question in the chat about, so if you get an award that comes with maybe a scholarship or an award that comes with a dollar amount of money, do you put that dollar amount in your CV as part of that award?
It depends a little on if your CV is fashioned for an application to a department in another university, and they recognize that that scholarship is with tuition or full ride, then you don't have to do that. If, however, it is to something that does not have that, then you include it, or you take that opportunity that in your application or in your statement to say that you were very fortunate to get an award that included the scholarship to do this, that, or the other.
Great, thank you.
So that's what I mean. It's audience specific. So you would find out, or you would try to figure out what would be the appropriate one for this specific case.
Another question, should a CV only be relevant to what you do now or what you want to do, or include everything you've done? I had a career before grad school where I learned a lot of skills, so I don't want to ignore it, but it has nothing to do with my current goals. What do I do?
Okay, if you have a career before who are you now, you definitely want to have a record of it, because what academics and applications hate if there are holes, if there are unexplained holes. So you want to say what your career was, but you do not want to spend, if it is not tied, as I understand the question, to what you are now or what you are doing now, then you indicate what it was and use, again, the letter of application or the statement, depending on what it is and how you fashion it, to say that this previous Korean experience helped you apply for where you are now and pursue the goal that you are now pursuing, setting. And therefore, you make the connection to what was not strictly a linear path by the way you describe who you are. It's your story. You make that story fit. And I think it is important for us to remember that even though academics, at least in this case, we learn how to read CVs, it's a shorthand that is really helpful. But for applications and nominations, what tends to stick is the story. So that's what I mean with the alignment of the CV and the letter of application, or the statement, depending on how they deal with it. And if you can make the connection of that you were doing something, I'll use one example of one of my students some time ago. He eventually went to law school and went to Harvard Law School. So it wasn't just a puny little thing, but he spent 2 years tutoring a deaf boy. And he used in his CV, he listed that, but in his statement, he said that set him on the path to pursue disability law. That's an effective way of making use of what seemed on the surface have no connection.
I will mention that Dr. Hardy also said, listing what you've done before, maybe in a different quote unquote life, that may display some of your transferable skills. And
Yes.
People are always looking for those transferable skills.
Yeah. But again, I think you want to be aware that CVs are blindered in the sense of really wanting to know about the educational aspects of it. That is knowledge and understanding. The resume, as I said, tends to be skill oriented. That doesn't mean that you should not address what the skills are that you learn. For example, if you were an intern at a lab and you really acquired skills that are critical for lab work, that is important to do. But again, later on in life, we fashion CVs differently, and we would have little paragraphs, very smart, saying, this is why this professional service, to use the example of Danica Stroon, really made me eligible or made me a good person for this application, for this job, or for this position, or this particular grant. But at your stage, I think you want to put it into your story, who you are and why, and then how you acquired those skills.
Here's another question. How long are personal statements typically? Just a bio or longer?
That depends very much on where you and to whom you apply. grant applications are very, very strict these days to keep people from writing little novels. And so you have to keep within the word guidelines. And so you have to be very selective. And actually now it's getting more to, we don't want to know all about you. We want to know what is most important about you. So generally speaking, when people write more than 2 pages, it can become tedious and people lose patience. There's no perfect answer. I really cannot do that. But from experience is you want to, if it says a 5-page statement, you write a 5-page statement and you make it interesting. If it says we want 2 paragraphs, you stick to 2 paragraphs. And so it really is flogging a dead horse. Audience specific is important. And I have a colleague who stops reading if there's a cutoff and it's beyond that. You know, that's drastic, but that can happen. So
I teach a workshop on writing personal statements, and I always tell people 1.5 to 2 pages, never more than 2 pages, because I'm one of those people, I stop reading at 2 pages.
Yeah. And you have to remember, if you read many of them, you just don't want to, it can't go on, you get tired. It is very tiring to read well focused, and you want the person who reads your statement to be well focused. And so that, yeah, I fully am with you, Dr. Roper, on that. It's the way it is.
Okay, here's another question. Any tips for documenting things in your CV? How often should you be documenting things in your CV?
Well, you have to be absolutely accurate when you give a citation to where something is published. In other words, you want to be sure that if somebody wants to follow up, and there are people who want to follow up, that they can find what you find. Then, in terms of documenting, if you have written an article and you are proud of it, and instead of putting that little sign in where you can click on because you can link the PDF, which is an elegant way of documenting it, then you can, some places allow you attachments. And again, there, read the application, because some don't. And if you try to clobber them with too much stuff, they don't interpret it as an overachiever, but as somebody who didn't read the instructions. And so there is no one size fits all. Every time you fashion a statement, a CV, and choose what else to include, it has to be done anew. You should have all of the pieces ready to cannibalize effectively, but it is starting anew every time and say, what do I need? And it's very pedestrian, but I found it useful that I print out the application instructions, and I make a list of what I need to do, and then I actually make checklists whether I've done it. It keeps me honest, it keeps me on task, and that has worked for me. I still do it. As I said, it's very pedestrian, very boring, but when early on in my career, I had a Fulbright, and one of the questions was, that's for studying internationally, and one of the questions was to the program officer, this was in Germany, and so the question was, is the bureaucracy in the United States less than in Germany? And the program officer very well said, it is different. It means you have to learn it every time wherever you are. And it can be very confusing. And we don't know why some disciplines like it this way and others like it that way, but that's the way it is. And so you stick to the instructions. And if the instructions are not specific, then you use the website of the department or unit or whatever that handles what you want to apply for, what the grant is, to get as much information that allows you to assume what the guiding is. And I think also it's not at all bad to ask your advisors, because most of us at IUPUI, we have people who come from all schools across the country, who've been to other countries. We have colleagues whom we can recommend you talk to if I'm not the right person to answer your question. And therefore, this is a community of scholars in the very best sense. We don't always do that perfectly, but we strive to do that. And that includes asking questions and asking questions appropriately. And I was at one of these meetings where it was made clear, or where one of the questions was, how do I address people while you do the proper formal thing and address people correctly? But you do ask questions, and most of us are very willing, and also I think want to be helpful to answer those questions.
Thank you. So I just wanted to echo something that Dr. Wokeck said. And, you know, I have a CV that is my university CV, and they want it in a specific format with specific things. And it goes on for pages and pages and pages, because that's what they want. They want all that information. I was just asked to apply for a leadership position in one of the societies that I belong to, and they wanted a 2-page CV.
Yeah.
So I went through that CV and I said, okay, what is the pertinent information that I can get from my big CV that I can put in this 2-page CV that would help people to understand that I have had leadership roles, or that I'm qualified for what I'm being asked to do. So, you know, that's a really good example of preparing your CV for whatever it is. So I echo that you have a main CV, but you have to prepare it differently for many different things that you use it for. So I would definitely echo that. Other questions people have? Everybody's good for CVs?
Okay, go ahead and do them.
Fantastic.
Oh, there's another question. I don't want you to miss it. How much detail should we include? Can I throw my thoughts in about details?
Oh, please do.
Okay. What I'll say is, I think if you have your own personal CV, that's your long running everything CV, you can add as much detail as you want to. If it's going to somebody specifically, I would try and limit it to some bullet points that would highlight what is really pertinent about the experience, the position, or whatever it is. Because like I said, or like Dr. Wokeck said, once it gets too lengthy, you kind of lose folks. So make sure that you're pulling out the pertinent things.
Yeah, and that goes back to read the application really carefully, because typically what you can do is, if you read the description of a grant, for example, or a position, there are certain words that you should underline, circle, or whatever you do, or color code, and make sure what in your CV matches that. And that's what you highlight. And the rest that can go, either depending if you have space limits, then you can throw it out, or you can, you don't have to include it. I shouldn't say you don't have to include it, or, but make sure that, again, that it fits that description. And people who write position descriptions, people who write grant, invite people to grant, are very careful in giving you those guidelines. They are not grabbed out of a hat. Typically, there is a committee that slogs over how to do that so that you don't get applications or applicants who miss the mark. And if you miss the mark, you're thrown out. And then those who read your application say, good, one less that I need to consider. You don't want to be in that pile.
Very good advice. So I've put, just while we're finishing up here, I've put a link to a survey that we'd like you all to fill out. This gives us an idea of how we're doing in these midday mentoring dialogues. You can also tell us additional topics that you would like us to discuss. So please go and fill out the survey and let us know how we're doing and what we can do in the future to help you to get where you want to go in graduate or professional school, because that's what we're here for.
Good.
Other questions before we go? All right, then it's time to go work on those CVs. So I would just like to thank Professor Wokeck for coming and spending this time for us. She was fantastic and really covered a lot of really good areas. So just thank you very much. And I hope that each of you realize just what fantastic information she had. So we will have this recorded, and so you can go back and see some of these things. And we invite you to join us for our next midday mentoring session, which will be happening next month. We'll get those details out to you.
Great. Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure to meet you, even if it was only on screen. And I wish you all the best in whatever your next endeavor are. Thank you.
Bye, all.
Have a good day, everybody.